At the end of the day, marketing comes down to behavioral change. It comes down to purchases that people make in terms of products or services and influencing why we make those purchases and how we make them and how often we make them. In this video, I'm going to talk about 5 key aspects of human behavior that you need to consider when we think about behavior change. The first most important factor to consider in terms of behavior change is reputation. That is, when we encounter information, often the first thing that we do is we think, how does this affect me? How does this impact me? And how does this change how others perceive me? So when we consider the fact that we process information through how it affects us, there are a number of things that we could do to impact that. I don't have time to go into all the many examples, but one way to consider reputation in behavior change is to link the behavior with an undesirable identity. So for example, if we're talking about teenage drinking, maybe they associate drinking with something positive, but if instead we can associate that with a group that they perceive negatively or that they perceive different from them, then they might be less likely to engage in that behavior. The second psychological factor to consider for behavior change is ownership. We want to feel ownership over the choices that we make. And the typical error that we often make is we think that we can just convince people why they should be doing something. And a good example of this comes from no smoking campaigns, where for years they told people all of the harm that smoking did. And finally, after repeatedly telling them about all the harm of smoking and why they shouldn't do that, they simply provided them information about how corrupt the tobacco industry was and allowed people to make their own decision. And that's when they finally started to see an impact. And this goes against the idea of reactance. When we're told what to do, we often react in the opposite way. The third factor for behavior change is practical. Make sure that the change in behavior is practical and tangible. So one of the important considerations there is that we often have boundaries in terms of when we're asked for something that's beyond our boundaries, we're automatically going to say no. But if we ask for something that's within our boundaries so that it's just a small behavior change, then we're willing to consider that change. So you want to think about what the boundaries are when they automatically begin to stop considering changes in behavior. And you want to think about if you could potentially ask for less. Because often when we commit to that first small act, we begin to see ourselves differently. We see ourselves as somebody who engages in that behavior, and it makes it easier for us to engage in bigger changes in behavior in the future. Number 4 is accessibility, and that relates to ease, right? So you want to make it as easy as possible to try the product. And in fact, that's one of the biggest limitations for growth. Clearly any company or any change in behavior that's different faces a big uphill battle if people haven't done it before. But if you could find a way to get them to engage in a trial, then it makes it a lot easier. A good example of the company that did this is Dropbox. We didn't really understand what it meant to store things on the cloud at some time, even though it's more common practice right now. So Dropbox allows people to use their services for free, and then only as you use it and you get comfortable with it and you understand it, do they begin to ask you to pay more to extend beyond the free services that you're already using. And the 5th psychological factor that we need to consider for behavior change is authority. And this depends on the degree of change in the behavior. And it's particularly important for very large asks if there's a lot of consequences for the behavior. So in this case, we're going to look for authoritative sources that demonstrate evidence for why we should be doing. We are going to look for some rationalization and some support for our behavior. And that's where authority can come in. What have the experts said? And hopefully there are a diversity of experts, and they're saying similar messages, and they're saying them close together in time, because that's more psychologically impactful. So those are the 5 psychological considerations that you need to think about if you're engaging in behavior change. People's reputation, the feeling of ownership, the notion that the change needs to be practical, it should be accessible, and that they will eventually look for evidence from authority. So thanks for checking out this video. We're posting regularly on our YouTube channel here at Intermark Group. We're a full-service marketing agency that embeds psychology in our creative for best results. Hit the subscribe and the bell button to stay tuned on our posts, and you can find more information about us below. Thanks for checking out this video.